This is Cold Start.
Moving into talking about track driving, how to get into track driving.
Yeah, I think it winds up being unnecessarily complicated for people to learn how to go to the track or what you need to do or how to go about it. So maybe we can demystify some things like, help people have an easier time of it. Just give a helping hand.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit more in our wheelhouse. Our backgrounds are driving not just on the street, but doing track days, racing. That's how we met. So I think it's great to share our experiences of how we got into track driving and some of the lessons that we learned along the way and how that could be beneficial for other people that are looking to get into it.
For sure. We're located here at Sonoma Raceway, which happens to be the first place I ever really properly learned to drive a car. Wasn't the first place on a racetrack that I drove, but it was kind of like the second. So going back to basics feels good, and seems like maybe we can help other people and encourage them to come out and try it for the first time if they haven't before or they want to know what they need to know.
Start from step one.
Yeah. Before you go to the track, you can't just turn up, right? There's got to be an event going on. And it's going to be an event that the organizers made available, open to the public, that's geared toward people of at least introduction level, like novices, because sometimes there'll be like an advanced only event going on and you don't want to turn up to one of those for the first time.
Yeah, and there's plenty of track day providers that are out there. To name a few, you have NASA, Hooked on Driving, Speed SF. There's an array, right? The best place that I've found to look up events in your area, it's a website called motorsportreg.com. What's great about it is you can set a radius around wherever you're located, and it's going to provide you with a bunch of events. And so growing up in Northern California, Sonoma Raceway, Laguna Seca, Thunder Hill are tracks local to me. So when I go on Motorsport Reg, I can see all the events that are going to be happening in the future at Sonoma. If I make that radius even wider, Thunder Hill and Laguna as well. It even includes some autocross stuff. We're not really going to touch on autocross here. I think both of us took the leap straight into going track driving. There's nothing wrong with autocross. I mean, maybe there is, but we're just going to move into track driving because I think, that's kind of where most people want to end up. Even if you're doing autocross, that's kind of where you want to go next. But Motorsports Reg, check that out. Find in your local area what sort of events are going on and pick a date that's going to work best for you.
Yeah, and we're making some assumptions, right? Like there's different ways to go do performance driving. There's plenty of different classes of cars and vehicles. We're talking about what most people do, which is I have a car or I'm thinking about getting a car or I want to use somebody else's car to go drive on a racetrack. And most of the time that means a road course, which we can use to differentiate from a dirt track or an oval, right? This is a course that looks like, turns left and right, and maybe there's some elevation changes or what have you. When people talk about racetracks, by and large, they mean these, and if they mean an oval, they'll say an oval. So that's a differentiation to be aware of.
And going back to, talking about you need a car, and what sort of car can you bring to the track? So let's really narrow in on that. And the great answer is you can pretty much bring anything to the track. Now, there are some rules, but I think it's a lot more open than people might think. You can bring a Toyota Camry. No one's going to tell you that you can't. But some of the limitations to be aware of going to these open track days, mainly with convertibles.
Yes.
Right? Now, and the reason why convertibles most of the times are not allowed into these track day groups is rollover protection. That is a piece that goes into it. A lot of older convertibles don't have built-in rollover protection. It's a safety thing. It's a safety concern.
That's right.
If you have a stock Miata, for example, an NA or NB, so the first two generations of the Miata, it will require you to install a roll hoop behind those seats. Now that roll hoop needs to be above your helmet line. So the top of your helmet needs to be below your roll hoop line so that when the car goes upside down, your helmet doesn't turn into the rollover protection.
And oh, by the way, you need a helmet. So we need to talk about that too. But on the convertibles thing, there are some modern convertibles, I'd say from the 2000s on, a lot of the bigger manufacturers put in sort of like these auto pop-up roll bars. Mm-hmm. So if the convertible tilts by a certain number of degrees or more, this thing will pop up in the back. It's really just a protection thing. different organizers of events have different rules about it. So back to what Silas was saying, if you go on Motorsport Reg or wherever you go to look to find an event, you need to find out what are the requirements of that organizer for this event. And usually they'll make something specific about convertibles, whether or not those are allowed or which models might be. And then they'll tell you things like you need to wear a helmet. And it's not just any helmet. You can't turn up with a motorcycle helmet or a display helmet that you bought that wasn't actually rated. There's going to be specific guidelines on how old that helmet is, and certain bodies that sanction and do regulations around safety for helmets. Very frequently they'll call out, oh, this one is, FIA allowed or SFI allowed or what have you. So you need to pay attention to that. And there's a bunch of equipment that's going to be required for you to participate. But first and foremost, it's your helmet and your car.
Going back to the car thing, on the other side of convertibles, on the other end, you can, in some situations, actually bring SUVs as well. So I do know that there are some organizations that do permit you to bring an SUV as long as it's quote unquote a performance SUV. So we're not talking about, a Jeep Grand Cherokee. We're talking about if it's a Trackhawk version or,
Right.
for an X5, if it's an X5M, obviously staying away from pickup trucks and things like that, things that have a high center of gravity. This might seem obvious to a lot of people, but you'd be surprised what people try to turn up at the track and try to get on track with. So keep it reasonable. If you're in a sedan, the range is pretty wide. There's not necessarily a minimum speed requirement. You might recognize that it's not as much fun if you're getting run over or passed all the time. So things to keep in mind, but if you're just getting into track driving for the first time, there's a pretty wide spectrum of what you can bring.
Yeah, and this is common sense, right? Yeah, a pickup truck, something that doesn't have the right sort of weight distribution, or doesn't look like the kind of stuff that you generally see at the racetrack on a road course. Those are probably not the right vehicles. But you know what? I've been out there with Tesla Model 3s. I've been out there with the family sedan. Those are going to be acceptable at a lot of the events that welcome beginners. Just keep in mind that not every car has equipment on it that's going to be well suited for the racetrack, which is to say, driving at higher speeds and then braking repeatedly with a lot of pressure. And so this is going to be something that probably will fail you sooner if you show up with the family SUV or a sedan that's not intended for performance. You're gonna run out of brakes, which is to say you're going to boil your brake fluid. You're going to use up your pads really quickly. The brake pedal's going to go mushy on you, and you're not going to get performance out of it after the first couple of times you really stomp on the thing. So it's not to say you need to go out and buy like racing brakes or something like that. Just be mindful of the kind of car that you're trying to bring into this. And if you think you look way different than everybody else, maybe you need to give it another look.
So this is moving into a great next thing, which is what we can call track prep. So we're assuming you've gone on to Motorsport Reg, you found a track day in your local area that allows novices, an intro group, usually it's group 1 is the beginner group, and you've looked and your car's approved, it can fit into this category. Now it's about, how do I prepare my car for the track?
There'll be requirements listed for all of these events. Sometimes they'll say you need to have a pre-event or track inspection done. I think that mystifies a lot of people. Like, what's this inspection? Where can I go get it done? Who wants to do it for me? Like, what's entailed there?
And for that inspection, I think a lot of people don't know it's a self-inspection. It can be, right? Now, if you're not too familiar with your vehicle or like the mechanical side of stuff, then yes, you would want to bring it to, a mechanic and say, hey, there's this list. Can you just put my car on the lift, go through, make sure that the brakes look good, things of that nature. Basically, this list is just basic mechanical wear items, ensuring that it's good to go,
Yeah, and safety, right? Like you have proper harness belts, you have proper safety belts in your car. You don't need harness belts. Everything works the way it's supposed to work, like your brake lights work, and stuff that you're going to need to use on track is properly working. And, if you're not sure if you're in a position to do your own self-inspect, just bring it to a local shop. It's no different than bringing your car in for an oil change, except it's less extensive even than that. And they could help, provide some expertise that maybe you don't have to ensure that you're set up for success.
In this step where a lot of people, I feel like, start to stray from what they need to do and get into kind of what I want or what I think I need to do. You don't need to modify your car necessarily before you go to a track day. A lot of people get hung up of, I need to put it on suspension, make it a little bit stiffer, or some of these additional items that might go above and beyond.
Yeah, tires is a thing. People wind up getting different tires when they don't really need to for their first time out.
Right. And that's the biggest thing is your first time out, realistically, you're not going to be driving that hard. There's going to be so many new things happening that realistically you're not going to be, 10 tenths on the brake pedal or, roasting through your tires. But that being said, like those two things, brakes and tires, that is what I always tell people should be the first thing on your mind if you want to do something before you go to the track. The brakes, namely, is one of those big things. One, it's really important to stop. And if you need to stop, you hope that you can stop. And brake failure can happen. Like you were kind of leaning on a little bit there of overheating those brakes. So that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go buy that big brake kit, the Brembos or the Alcons or, whatever you see on like flashy sports cars. Your stock calipers are actually a lot more powerful than you think. And it's this great conversation of if your car can get into ABS, it has enough brake power, right? As soon as the tires start to skid, you can't stop it any more than that. And so what I always recommend for people to do is do a brake fluid flush and put in an upgraded fluid. So the fluid is what usually tends to fail first. There's a lot of heat that gets into the system, especially since you're braking over and over and over again. And what that does for a street fluid is the boiling temperature is actually pretty low. I mean, it's supposed to exist on the street only, so they optimize it for that. And if it overheats, it'll actually boil and it'll create bubbles, and air can compress, fluid doesn't. We don't need to go back to physics, but that's basically what happens. And so that's where you get brake fade, or like a squishy pedal where the brake pedal starts to go closer and closer to the floor and it's not actually maximizing its potential. So upgrading that fluid, making sure that it's not going to boil and get squishy, is a great first thing to do. It's pretty cheap too, right?
Yeah. Spending a lot of time on brakes sounds like a funny thing. Like if you're going to go to the track the first time, you're thinking, I just want to go stomp on the throttle pedal, and what do I need to worry about this? Because you know what? How fast you go is optional, but stopping is not. You're going to have to stop a lot. Sometimes in an uncontrolled way, sometimes in a controlled way. But that's the most important piece of safety equipment you have. It's also the most important part of your performance equipment. To drive well at the track, to drive quickly, it's really more about your brake pedal technique than it is your throttle technique. So you're going to learn that when you go out. But we're even a little ahead of ourselves, right? We were talking about what you need to do, what kind of car you need, what you need to do to prep it. Like, okay, let's say you've done all of that. Maybe you need a helmet. Like, how do you find a helmet? Right? You can go online and there's places that sell a zillion of them, but you need to know you have the right thing. If you're near a racetrack, some fortunate areas have like a pro shop where you can go in and there's people who know about these. They used to call these speed shops, out away from racetracks, where you can go and they have some equipment that you would use for your body or for your car to equip it with safety and performance gear for going to the racetrack. So you want to find one of these places. They are online too, and there are several that, they have good customer service. You can get everything you need to get online. You might need to exchange some emails or have a phone call or a FaceTime with somebody so that you can ensure that you're getting the right equipment that fits well. A good fitting helmet isn't really comfortable, let me say. It doesn't hurt, but it's going to be a little snugger maybe than what you're used to. So a matter of getting the right fit is going to be important for you. But even that, there are track day provider groups for beginners that they'll have helmets available to rent. So you can just show up and say, hey, if you have a helmet for rent, I'll pay you for that. Usually it's like $10 for the day US. It's not really expensive. And they'll have already gone through the work of finding something that's appropriate for the track, that's safe, and that meets the regulations necessary for the event. You'll have to give it back at the end of the day. It might smell like somebody else's sweat, but then there's this other thing they give you called a head sock or a balaclava. So that's this layer you wear over your head. It looks like a ski mask between your skin and the helmet, so that if you sweat a lot, which you will, it absorbs that and it keeps the thing clean for the next person who comes along.
Talking about helmets, it's an expensive thing. Like even a cheap helmet is what, a couple $100.
Easily, yeah.
And I would say don't get too caught up in like getting a flashy helmet for your first helmet, because all safety equipment expires. There's an expiration date to everything. So when you first get into it, buy a cheap helmet. One of the big things that I've seen people buying now is a company called Zamp, and they have relatively affordable helmets. They still meet, safety requirements. So I'm not saying like buy the cheap thing and it's not going to protect you.
Yeah.
These are still, good pieces of equipment. And that's a big distinction between motorcycle helmet and a race helmet. They actually go through different certification. So there's a difference between a Snell SA rating and a DOT helmet. So a DOT helmet is usually your motorcycle helmet. It's made for the street. We all know, Department of Transportation, DOT. So those helmets are not race helmets. Now, helmets that go through Snell SA, those are built for road racing. So that's the type of helmet that you're looking for. You can spend a bunch of money and get a flashy carbon fiber helmet for your first track day. You don't need that. I always try to tell people everyone needs to own a fully blank white helmet. That's like the first belt in karate, right? Like you got to start looking like a noob and a novice. And when I first started, I just had a bland white helmet, and I felt like I was the Stig.
I was going to say, but hey, you look like the Stig too, right? So that's kind of cool.
But so I always try to tell people, it's like, no, for your first helmet, it has to be white, no decals, no stickers, nothing. Like, just feel like a noob for the first couple times, and it kind of puts you in that right mindset too of going to the track for the first couple times, not feeling like, you're going to set a PB or a track record your first lap out.
That's right. Yeah. In certain places, they're going to have a requirement for even like the clothes you wear to the racetrack, right? So some organizers will stipulate, all cotton or like organic materials, not polyester, not, whatever other kind of like, synthetics are out there. That's really an extenuating circumstance thing. But the reason for that is, if something goes really, really badly and there's a fire, your beginning track day, there's probably not going to be a fire, but everybody wants to cover themselves. And so wearing materials that won't stick to your skin if they were to burn is the intent there. It sounds really scary. The reality of it is this really never comes up, but it winds up being in the requirements certain groups put out. So you need to be aware of that. You don't need to go out and buy a racing suit. You don't need to go out and buy fireproof stuff. You can wear your jeans. You can wear your hoodie most of the time. Look at what it's made of, right? Whatever it is that you normally wear on a day-to-day is probably relatively appropriate. But remember, it's like doing any other exercise or sporting or outdoor type activity. You're going to get hot. Even if you have air conditioning, it's not going to be sufficient to cool you. You're going to sweat in the car. You're going to be getting in and out of the car over and over again during the day. Think about the weather that you're going to be in. Those are all things to consider for what you would wear in the car. Some places will say you have to have long sleeves, whatever the rules say, generally follow those. And if you're not clear about it, you could always ask. Everybody's been there for the first time once. And if they're organizer of an event, that's their job, is to explain things to people who haven't done this before. And if they're not being nice to you and the questions you're asking, or they're making fun of you because they think they're too novice or something, maybe that's not the right group. Find another one. They'll be more than happy to accommodate you and help you get started there.
And one of the most important things that you can wear to a track day is your shoes. So closed-toe shoes, right? So no flip-flops, nothing like that. But also keep in mind of having a small-soled shoe. And what I mean by that, I'm sure we've seen like Yeezy Boosts where the sole of the shoe actually goes out and it's super wide. I would stay away from those because they can get caught between the pedals. But a comfortable driving shoe, something that it has a small sole, it's tight to your foot, you're able to flex your toes, there's some bend in that shoe. You just want pedal feel. You want to be able to feel the brake pedal, the accelerator, clutch pedal if you're driving a manual. But shoes are a really important thing to have that additional feel. So I would stay away from like big boots or really tall soled shoes. For those female drivers out there, nothing too fancy, no heels, nothing like that.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen examples that are wrong here. And it's obvious, if it's not comfortable to drive in, you're not going to be doing a good job at the track in it. So wear something comfortable, but, with those sort of requirements, I think, as well, or those kind of characteristics.
An additional point before we move on, tires. The thing I want to say about tires is I always try to discourage people from moving into a quote track tire or a sports tire too soon. And there's a couple of reasons here. One is track tires are stickier tires. They're more expensive because you can go faster. In the beginning, you don't need that. And your cheap tires, whatever came on your car in all seasons, something like that is going to be perfectly fine for those first couple track days. Also, if they have less grip, that's going to be to your benefit in the very beginning. That means you're going to reach the limit of grip at a lower speed and allow yourself a little bit more time to catch the car, learn car control, learn the limits. Now, if you go for these uber sticky tires in the beginning, it's going to mask a lot of your mistakes. And so when something goes wrong, it's going to go wrong in a big way. So cheap tires are actually good in the beginning. They're a good learning tool. This isn't a money spending exercise. Trust me, you're going to spend enough money as it is on the cheap end just to go do a track day. So,
Yeah.
Okay, we got you dressed.
Yes.
You have a helmet.
You have an event you're going to. You know where that is.
You've prepped your car. Maybe made some minor modifications, but try to stay away from that too much. Now we're going to the track.
Yeah, well, you're going to go to the track, whatever it is, in a week, in a month, in a couple of days. There's things that you need to do before you get to the racetrack. What is the weather conditions going to be when you go out there? Is it going to be cold or hot? Is it going to be raining potentially? Like, we don't know perfectly ever, but we can make some preparations. Just like if you're going camping, you wouldn't go camping if there was a sudden blizzard coming through town, or if it was going to be, 120 degrees out, you'd make preparations. So just like that, imagine you're going to be spending a lot of time outside. So be prepared for that environment, both inside your car and outside. There's a lot of standing around in the parking lot, the paddock, away from the racetrack, but on some concrete surface or on some gravel. So you want to be comfortable doing that all day. And oh, by the way, you're going to hear people say, oh, you should hydrate. You should drink a lot of water. And that sounds like a funny thing because you haven't even done this thing yet. You're going in maybe a couple of days. You don't know that you're going to get really sweaty or hot. Maybe it's a cold day. You think, I'm fine. I don't really do that. You know what? It's one of those things where you keep your brain prepared. And getting to the racetrack, you have a lot to think about. You're going to be taking in a lot of new information for the first time. So whatever you can do to have your body and your mind be sort of at their best. You want to get a good night's sleep the night before the event. You want to stay out partying or out drinking or anything like that. So this idea to get hydrated is sort of code in a way for, drink a lot of fluids. That's important. But it's also treat yourself in a way that you'll be able to perform at your best. Like, imagine you had a really important test the next day and it mattered a lot. And in this test, if you don't do it well, like, you could get hurt. It's not just like, you didn't get a good grade on a thing. So it's important to get your equipment ready. We talked about the car, your clothes, but it's your body and your mind and just your headspace. Like, be prepared to go to this thing. You're going to potentially be new to this. You're going to go with the intent to learn. You don't know anything yet, or maybe you think you do. You know how to drive a car on the road, but it's an entirely different thing. I drove a car on the road for many, many years before I ever went to the racetrack. And one of the few things I did that was really intelligent the first time out was I knew that I was a beginner. I had a lot of friends who did this stuff, and they're like, look, just don't think too much of your abilities because you know how to drive on the freeway or something like that. So it's going in with what I might call like beginner's mind, drop the ego at the door, go in, and if there's somebody who has something to say to you, don't judge who that person is or what you think they might know. Because if they've done this more than you, then they probably have useful information to impart. You should listen. You should take it in, store it away. It might be good advice and you'll learn from it. It might not be, but now you're just getting experience that other people have had sort of by proxy. And that's only a useful thing. So it's all about having your head sort of in the game, knowing what you're there to do, getting yourself ready for that so that when you do show up, you can do the best that you can do.
A lot of people think that driving or racing isn't necessarily a physical activity. They like to think, oh, what are you doing? You're just sitting there and turning a steering wheel. I do that every day.
Driving in circles. How hard can that be?
And there is a piece that it is physical. I'm not here to argue that to an extent. But on the other piece of it, it's mentally exhausting. I think that's where people are even more surprised by is at the end of the day, it's so easy to have a headache or something like that. And you just feel exhausted. And it's not necessarily like, oh, my body aches and it's sore. And it was like, physically excruciating, but just mentally you're drained. And it's because, like you're talking about, everything is so new. It might be hard for some of us to remember back when you first started driving a car. But when you were first behind the wheel and there's all this information that you're having to process and it's all new, so you don't know what's important and what's not important. You have to take everything in. And when you go to the racetrack, it's almost reigniting that beginner mindset, and it's so much. And if you don't know how to block out the stuff that's irrelevant and look solely at what's important, and this is like, the whole piece of like driver's eye, focus, tunnel vision in the good way, not in the bad way. Like, these are all things that you have to learn over time, and how to block out irrelevant information and focus and hone in. And if you have one lapse of judgment, that could mean damaging something. Heaven forbid you hit a wall. So the mental aspect of it, I think a lot of people underestimate and don't prepare properly. And that's a huge piece of hydrating. Make sure that you eat good foods. Don't eat anything spicy. Like, these are weird things to talk about, but like, have a bland breakfast. Make sure that like your body isn't going to be in any sort of weird feel that's going to pull your mind away from your activity. When I first started racing, I always had the same breakfast. And that just ensured to me that like there wasn't going to be an additional variable. I always had blueberry oatmeal. That was like, I know this is going to be fine and this is going to upset my stomach or anything like that. So make sure that you're not having any other issues, that when you show up to the track, you can solely focus on driving.
Yeah, I mean, the track day can be a long day too. Generally, they're like a 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 8 to 5 kind of day, and there's a lot to take in. And oh, by the way, if you're not a showing up on time kind of person, these events won't let you participate if you're not there for what they call the driver meeting. So before the track day even starts, and generally they'll start early in the day, 8 o'clock in the morning, or even earlier in some places. And then that's the time the track goes what they call hot. That's the time when you can bring a car out on the racetrack. Maybe it's 9 o'clock. But prior to that, there's going to be this driver's meeting, and you need to be there on time for it so that you can get the instructions for the day. You can learn about procedures for the day, safety things, just to know what you're going to do when you get there. And so preparing for that, maybe you've got a fairly long drive to get to the racetrack. Maybe you need to go to bed early. And I know that sounds like a super lame old person kind of thing to say, but the reality is you need to be well rested. You need to show up ready to go. So plan for the day in a way that you would plan for a really big event. Like, granted, you could always come back another day, but now you've done all this work to prepare for the day, to get your car ready. It winds up costing a lot of money and time. So you want to put it to good use and make sure you're prepared for when you do roll into this place, to get there at the right time. And then you're going to show up at a racetrack. What's that like?
And showing up at a racetrack, it can be daunting. I know for me, like growing up watching racing on TV and stuff, like I always saw racetracks as these like holy places, like famous people have gone there, and these professional races, especially Sonoma Raceway, growing up watching NASCAR go to Sonoma, like it's a significant place, or, to me at least, it felt that way. So yeah, when you first show up at a racetrack, it might feel like, oh, I kind of don't belong, or like first day at high school, like there's this pressure, that you're almost putting on yourself. But showing up like Sonoma Raceway or any other racetrack, there's usually a security gate. At that gate, they'll make you sign a waiver. Basically just sign your life away if anything bad happens. It's not their fault. You're entering a racetrack. You'll sign that. They'll direct you to where the paddock is going to be. So in racing, we call the parking lot the paddock. If you're into horses, this probably makes more sense to you of like, oh yeah, the paddock, it's a big open space, right? Yeah, it's a parking lot, essentially. As you enter the paddock, it'll feel like you entered a classroom for the first time and you're like, where am I supposed to sit? Where am I supposed to go? And so when you enter the paddock, you see other people parking their cars and taking stuff out of their cars and getting things set up in their little area. Some organizations do have a map that they'll give you and kind of say, all right, if you're a beginner, this is kind of the beginner area. If you're a racer, this is where all the racers set up. If you're an instructor, the instructor's set up over here. All of this pieces of information will be emailed to you once you sign up for a track day. So make sure to read through your emails, read through the attachments, understand to the best of your ability where you're supposed to go. But once you're in that paddock, just look for an open space. Look for available area. If it's going to be a hot day, try to find some shade. If you showed up late, there's probably no shade left. But find an area, park up your car. If you have anything in your car, make sure to start taking those things out. It's always good to, maybe have a reusable grocery bag where if you have like small little items that can just rattle in your door card or in your center glove box, things like that, just put those into a bag, put that outside of the car, making sure that you don't have any extra stuff in the trunk either. You don't need to take out your spare tire. You don't need to go to that extent. We're not trying to shed a bunch of weight. It's just making sure that you don't have any sort of like free floating items that can move around, distract you, and heaven forbid, get underneath a pedal.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. People keep a lot of stuff in their cars and you might forget what's in there, right? Something that you put in there a few weeks ago, you didn't remember was in there, and You're not going to find out until it's rattling around in the back of your trunk when you're going around the racetrack. Loose items in the passenger cabin, in the driver cabin as well. A lot of organizers will make you take the floor mats out of your car. And the reason for that is they can slide around. I mean, we've all had those cars where like they don't actually stick to the Velcro or the little mount points where they're supposed to go if those exist at all. And they can slide under your pedals. And that could be a really big problem if your floor mat bunches up under your brake pedal, or worse, it sticks such that your throttle gets pushed down and you don't mean for it to be there. So there's a reason for these things that might sound silly on the outside, but taking stuff out of your car, everything's out of your car that you don't need to have in there. You'll see people who show up at the track and have like a whole kit. They'll have, a giant set of tubs they take out, and they'll have a folding chair, and they'll have duffel bags full of stuff. And like, you don't need all that your first time out, but do pay attention to what other people are doing, because maybe there's a reason for it. A lot of people will bring a portable tire compressor depending on what facilities are available, because there's a lot of changing in the pressure of your tires. We'll talk more about that, but just look at the equipment and the things people bring out. You'll see people sometimes pack a lunch, pack a bunch of water. Some tracks are well equipped and you can get that stuff there, but a lot of them aren't. Most of them are kind of like a glorified pile of dirt with some pavement on it. And so you need to bring everything for yourself that you need to operate for an entire day. Yeah, there'll be a bathroom and there'll be a place to go to have the meeting or whatever, but it might be under a tree. And, what's available there might not be to your liking, and you won't be able to function well for an entire day unless you have the things that you need. So only you could know what those things are. And if you need to bring a bunch of stuff, bring a backpack, bring a duffel bag, put it in there. And here's the other thing. Nobody told me this when I first rolled up at the racetrack. When you put your stuff down, everybody's there for the same event. It's probably pretty safe. Now, there are racetracks that I've been to where you want to be careful about what you put where, because it might not be there when you come back. But if there's a paddock, a parking lot with a bunch of cars and all these people are putting their stuff down and they leave it there when they go out on track, nobody else from that event is going to come and steal from them. It's a generally pretty trustworthy place because, again, everybody's there to have a good time, to learn. They're out there for an event, and it's fairly limited as a group just for all these requirements that we're talking about getting there in the first place. The safety at the racetrack is, managed by that person at the gate, ensuring security. That's partly why you sign these waivers. But, you take your stuff out and you put it down, and you put it down on the ground.
I'd say for your first couple track days, don't overthink it. Bare minimum, you're going to be spending time outside. Bring some water, bring some sunscreen. Don't overpack, because the more stuff you put in your car, the more stuff you're going to have to take out. But like you were talking about, for the first couple track days, pack light, but pay attention. What are other people bringing? What do they bring it in? They might have a fold-out chair, some tools and things like that. For your first couple track days, I'm not telling you to be a mooch or anything like that, but you'll pretty much get away with not bringing anything. And if you actually need something, most likely there's someone else in the paddock that has some tools. It's a really great community in that way of, people are more than willing to help or lend some tools or a tire pressure gauge or something like that. So before you dive all the way in and buy all this stuff that you might not have hanging around your garage, go there, see what other people have. If you have to borrow something, be like, okay, maybe I need to jump on Amazon or wherever on the internet and buy one of those and have it by the next track day.
Yeah. Another thing to consider is, depending on where you're going to the racetrack, the time of year, there's a lot of bugs. And when you're driving at speed, they get on your windshield. On the highway, you just put on your windshield wipers and squirt the fluid and, it cleans it off. But like, what's going to happen is they're going to get embedded on there. So having a way to clean your windshield isn't a bad thing to think about. Now, first time out, again, you could just ask somebody if they have a roll of paper towels and some Windex or, spray on stuff or whatever. Hey, can I borrow some of that? I didn't think to bring it this time, but you're not going to want to do that every time. So as a beginner, just be aware that these things are out there and they're considerations. You know yourself, again, as well as anybody, and how you're going to want to manage it. But these are some of the basic things that you might need in your first few track days.
And I'd say, looking into organizations for your first time, I would strongly encourage you to find organizations that have novice groups that include an instructor for the first couple sessions, for the day. Having this extra piece of, information and guidance, this person that's going to basically be taking care of you for your first track day, I think it's insanely valuable. Some organizations, they'll have that instructor sit right seat with you. That's pretty rare nowadays, to have someone actually in the car. for safety reasons and other stuff. But other organizations, the way that they've started to do it is a lead follow format. And what that basically means is that the instructor, they're usually volunteers. So be nice to these people, right? They're basically trading their time and knowledge for track time. So take that into consideration when dealing with an instructor. But those individuals might be in their own personal vehicles, their own track cars, and they're going to give you a radio. Sometimes they don't, but it's nice if they have a radio to put in the other cars. And they'll basically, if there's radios, they'll talk you through the lap. They'll let you know, place the car here, move it over here, brake here, release the brake, get it down to this part of the track. Things called apexes, where you get to the inside curbing or inside of the corner. And it's really nice. It's a slow process. They might not be going more than 5/10 of the speed that you should be going. But learning things slow is good because we want to make sure that we're doing the proper things with the proper technique before we go too fast. Because if we're doing the wrong thing and we're going fast, it just means we're going to get to the wrong place quicker, which sometimes might mean the dirt or the wall. And I think everyone for their first handful of track days want to keep their car clean. They want to keep it shiny. If those instructors don't have radios, they'll basically just be driving on the racing line and you follow. You just follow that car. If he positions his car all the way to the right side of the track, almost puts his 2 tires in the dirt, you do the same thing. Maximize the pavement is like we always say. And then sometimes in those trains or lines of cars with the instructor, there might be multiple novices and one car will be directly behind the instructor. And then after a couple laps, he might signal you with his hazards or turn signal, something like that, where then you'll switch and then each person has time behind the instructor.
Yeah, I mean, chances are if you're going to the track, maybe you've played a racing video game or done some sim racing or something. You know what they call the ghost car, right? That's sort of the model that you're supposed to follow. Where their car is, you kind of try to put your car in the same place.
Or that blue racing line.
That blue racing line, yeah, that's telling you where to drive. And that's what that lead is going to do, to which you follow. Your goal is to have your car be in the same place, looking kind of the same way their car is when it gets to that place. And that's how you'll learn the line of that particular racetrack, right? Every track's a little different, whether you make a left turn or right turn next, whether there's a hill or a valley or some kind of change in the surface. Part of this lead follow experience is to get you acclimated with this specific location, this racetrack, its features, and how you need to drive your car given those features, starting slow, but then little by little increasing the pace and learning the dynamics of how your car responds when you drive around this racetrack. You've driven on the road before. You know what happens when you are going fast enough and you come up to a curve, right? There's this G-force. The car kind of like you get pushed to the side of the car, inside your car, because the speed and the physics of such are pushing you in that direction. And you're going to feel that in a way that's more intense perhaps than you felt that before. It's why it's so important to have your seatbelt on and tight and snug so that, you can move around a limited amount inside the car when the car is sort of pushing you to one side or the other. Same thing under acceleration and braking. If you really stomp on the gas, you kind of get pushed back in your seat a little bit. Or if you really have to hit the brakes, you kind of like lurch forward in your seat a bit. So be aware of those things are going to be magnified in the car the faster you go. And in particular, in sort of correlation to these features of the racetrack. So that lead follow is really important. You want to look, you want to listen, you want to pay attention. If there's a radio, somebody's going to talk to you while you're driving. You're taking in a lot of new information all for the first time. And they know to be sort of sparing with giving you information over that radio because it can be overwhelming to figure out everything that you need to do. But at the same time, that's sort of the most important voice. Think of it like your conscience telling you, like, this is what you need to know to be successful, to do well. It's like a talk track that's helping and encouraging you to do the right things so that eventually you can do them on your own without that.
One last thing I want to cover, because we've given you guys a lot of information here, and it's a lot, and it's taken a while to discuss all this, but I want to wrap up on a very important piece, and I try to tell all of my friends that start getting into track driving, it's mindset. What is the sort of mindset that you go to the track for the first time with? And that's a really, really important piece. Talking about instructors, they're going to be telling you a lot of information, but the way that you're processing that information and the sort of mindset that you have and how you approach the day is also a very, very important piece. And This is going to burst a bubble for a lot of people in like the whole mystique driving on a track.
Oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait.
Once your car touches the track, there are rules and there's a system that occurs on that track. And your first couple days, unfortunately, your mindset, your focus is not going to be on going fast. It's not going to be on lap times. Lap times might not even be a consideration for months of track days. There is so much to learn of just the ecosystem that exists on the track, of how you engage with your car, the racetrack, and the people around you. So to dive into that, of this mindset of how we approach going to the racetrack, focus on learning the rules. Focus, and by rules, I mean the racing line as well as etiquette. So when we talk about the racing line is all about position. And you do things in certain places as you go around the racetrack. That means on this straightaway, I move from this side to this side as I accelerate. I come into a braking zone. I brake. I release the brake as I turn in. I go from this point on the outside to down to this point on the inside. I do not get back on throttle until I pass that apex. There's all of these things, and it's such a complex thing, and I think people don't give driving and racing the credit it deserves of how complex all of these things are and how they intertwine to just turn a lap. And there is so much to learn before you add speed to it, before you reach the limit of what your car can do. Just make sure you're doing the right thing at the right point, then add speed.
Yeah, you know, if your experience has only been off track watching other people drive, or maybe in a video game or something like that, it can be hard to understand why people put their car where they put it. Like, well, isn't the fastest way between 2 points a straight line? Like, why wouldn't you just put your car here? But there's a lot of things going on at once. There's a lot of dynamics to consider in how the car works, how the tire works, where the other cars on the track are, you know, the curve of this turn that's coming up. There's all these different things, and the people who've been doing it know something. They're doing it for a reason. So if you don't think too much in advance about what you're going to need to do, just follow what you see other people doing. Follow your instructor, the people who are more experienced than you, and go along with that. It's again to that mindset of being positive and leaning in to learn, but there's a way it needs to work. It's just like there's traffic lights at intersections. There's no traffic lights on the racetrack. So you need to know what's the protocol for if another car comes up behind me, next to me, is in front of me, how to do that. And if you don't have experience, you need to be open to learning those things and be of the mindset that you want to learn. You want to learn the right way to do it so that you can not be the person getting in other people's way, the person with bad etiquette, the person making it unsafe for other people. I mean, the worst thing would be the person who doesn't get invited back because they just couldn't listen and internalize the lessons that everybody else is picking up on.
I think to wrap it up, the biggest piece of advice is don't hesitate to ask. Like the racing community, it's such a welcoming community. Everyone there is willing to help. If you need any assistance or you need a piece of knowledge, do not hesitate to ask someone, because we all love this sport. We all love this activity. We all want other people to join. We want to share that experience. We want to share that love. We also want to make sure that if you're coming and joining our sport, that you can play by the rules and you can follow along, and making sure that we can all play well together.
I don't want this to sound like a plug, but there's this saying that a bunch of my friends and I had that we turned into sort of a slogan for our club, which is track days are the best days. And there's a reason we say that, because they are. Going and hanging out with your buddies and doing something that you all want to do together, those are the best days. Those are the things you look back fondly in your life on. You're like, oh, you remember that day we went and did that thing? And oh, it was just so fantastic. Like, you want more of those, right? That's why we do these kinds of things. So make your day the best day it could be, and you'll have more of them like this. And that's what this whole experience and activity is about. So, you know, drive at the track, have your best day out there, and get ready, come back again, because you're going to want to. And everybody else there wants to as well.
Get outside your comfort zone, get out to your local track, and thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Silas.
Thanks, Todd.